Hello and welcome to the Nicole Mason Show, the show where we bring trailblazing women who are movers and shakers in their respective industries and vocations, women who bring strategies for their successful careers, women who have put their trials and their triumphs right on Front Street so that others can look and glean from what they have been through so that they too can know they can make it. This today I am so excited to have with us a very powerful woman of God, a dear friend, mentor, sister, mom, all of those different roles she's played and continues to play in my life. And so Dr. Cheryl Mercer, I want to read just a little bit of her bio because it is extensive. An ordained elder at Greater Mount Calvary Holy Church in Washington, D.C., under the pastorate of Archbishop Alfred Owens and Dr. Susie C. Owens. She is the co-director of the Discipleship Ministry and serves on the board of her ministry to women under Dr. Susie Owens. Dr. Mercer is also an adjunct professor at the Calvary Bible Institute, where she has served for many years teaching hermeneutics and preparing for Christian ministry. She received her doctorate of ministry summa cum laude in chaplaincy and social justice from Lancaster Bible College, Capital Bible Seminary, and Graduate School after serving and studying women's incarceration rates both in the United States and abroad. Dr. Mercer is a proponent of restoring, quote, the beloved community as referenced in Isaiah 11, verses 1 through 9. She has been appointed professor of religious studies at Goucher College in Baltimore, Maryland. Serving as the clergy ambassador for the United States Attorney's Office of the District of Columbia, Dr. Cheryl also serves as the chair of the board of directors at the Fairview Reentry Center for Women in Washington, D.C., leading community efforts to bring services to women returning home from prisons around the nation. She was selected by the International Coalition of Children with Incarcerated Parents to present an academic paper and conduct workshops at the University of Huddersfield, West Yorkshire, England, United Kingdom, and served as one of its conference co-chairs for the 2021 International Conference held this year in the United States. Listen, this bio is extensive. I want to bring to the Nicole Mason Show so you can hear directly from her, Dr. Cheryl Mercer. Welcome to the Nicole Mason Show.
Good morning, Nicole, and thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I want to start out, jump right in. Tell us a little bit about who is Dr. Cheryl Mercer?
Well, if I could sum it all up, at this point in my life, I am who God has created me chapter by chapter, glory by glory, season by season. Because from the very beginning, God certainly had a plan in my creation, as he does with all of us. But in each and every season of my life, God has perfected that gift and that work that needed to happen at that particular time. So I am ever evolving, and even as a senior, and I respect the fact I glory in what God has done for me as a senior. I don't try to be anything but that. I'm trying to keep up with you though, with all the latest stuff in the culture, really. But in other ways, I respect the fact that he has kept me all of this time and brought me into this place. What you're reading in the bio really is the work of God from season to season in my life. I started out as a very young child in the gift, I guess, of teaching. At heart, I am a teacher. In third and fourth grade, the teacher would leave the classroom and put me in charge. So I was the one helping other people to read, to write, to monitor behavior, to check papers. So little did I know what that meant, but yet there it was. And so there was a pivotal moment, actually, when I got to college. There was a homecoming event that took place. And here I was at college, maybe I was about 20 years old then. And at homecoming, I saw 3 of my elementary school teachers there. It did not dawn on me that God would bring them back, and they remembered me. So here we are at homecoming, and they said to me, "We knew that you were going to be a teacher." Nobody said it to me, but they knew it. So at heart, I am a reader, a book person. You put a book in front of me, I'm going to consume it. And I treasure in being a lifelong learner. So even with the degree, the terminal degree that I just received, there's still more. There's more that I need to learn about IT and the tech world that we live in. I am a learner. I'm a reader, writer, thinker person. And I keep myself, I do the best I can to keep myself open to the move of God, because I do know that God is still perfecting what is in me. But everything that you read in the bio, sometimes I shake my head at what's in there, because it really is a testament to what God is doing to bring me into purpose while I walk this earth. That's it.
Yeah, that's so awesome and amazing. And, I always marvel at the hand of God, because I can certainly see that God's hand has always been on you. Even to this day, I watch and marvel at how you continue to, push the boundaries as it relates to women, and really helping women to rise above situations that in other that would otherwise crush them. And so I want to turn now our attention to the great work that you do and have done with women who find themselves incarcerated. I've had the privilege and the honor of going with you to some of the prisons in our local area, and just watching you and how you have been able to really encourage the women and soothe them with your empathy, your compassion, and how you teach them. So talk a little bit about that work that you found yourself in and how that came to be.
Well, toward the end of my career as an educator in Northern Virginia, I spent 35 years in secondary ed and adjunct at George Mason. I decided to go back to school to get another degree, went to seminary and got a degree in divinity and social justice. Now, where did that come from? Well, my undergraduate degree was actually pre-law, and I had intended to go to law school. I was waiting to get into law school when the school system in Philadelphia had an all-call. We need teachers, and we will, do this. We'll add a bonus, whatever. Come teach. Well, that's how I ended up into teaching, but not realizing I was an actual teacher at the time. At 17, I was going to be a lawyer. Well, when I went to seminary decades later, that law in me, that need, that interest in justice perked. And so I majored in social justice, and through those instructors, like-minded persons in seminary with me, colleagues who had already been in that walk, pastors as well, doors began to open for me to do a kind of internship so that I could be immersed in the culture. And so my first internship actually was in the Caribbean. And I met women who were incarcerated there and got some insight on the criminal justice system in the Caribbean. And then when I came back to the US, other doors opened for me to go into some of the facilities that you've been in with me. And I found that over and over again, listening to the stories of women, their narrative, the narratives seem to all be the same. And when I talk with them about their families and their upbringing, most of the women were had children. So looking at it reflectively, as I'm putting my notes and things together, we're talking about sizable portions of women who are incarcerated, leaving behind children who may not get the nurturance that they need. So we're talking about huge gaps in our communities of care. What is it that's bringing women into prisons at alarming rates? And I'm talking back in the 80s and 90s, we're talking 300, 400, 500, 600% increases. Well, in doing the homework, here I go with the books and the research. It was the same kinds of demons attacking women in the Caribbean, in the US, and across the nation, across the world. Drugs, alcohol, abandonment, trauma, lack of education, illiteracy. And not that men don't suffer the same kinds of situations, but here again, the research points out quite often when men go to prison, there's somebody waiting for them. When women go to prison, they may be abandoned by the people that they knew, or they are judged so severely, they don't get letters, they don't get visits. Sometimes the guys get far more than the women do from the outside. So that meant not only were women on the inside suffering from the shame and guilt of what they had gone through, and some of them did what they did. It wasn't like they were all in there innocent, but knowing how to come out, knowing to come out and there's nobody there for you. You may not get your children back, that kind of thing. That's devastation. That keeps women from healing. You can't go forward if you're constantly looking over your shoulder about what you did and there's nothing you can do to correct it. So in those circles of persons that I spoke with and began to walk with came the organization, INSEP as we called it, the organization, the Coalition for Children of Incarcerated Parents. Dr. Nancy Looks from Scotland and Dr. Avon Hart-Johnson from the US invited me to England for their semi-annual conference to present some of the research that I had begun preliminarily before I actually completed my doctoral work, but it was a part of my dissertation studies. And in England, at the University of Huddersfield, were persons from around the globe who are working on incarceration as it pertains to women. So it really opened up my eyes. We're talking South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, Italy, Germany, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Uganda, Brazil. So this is bigger than anything that I had previously conceived, just looking at the Caribbean and the US. The paper my presentation and paper along with the others really had a big impact globally on the issue. And while we were there, we were given permission by the Department of Ministry to go into a women's prison in England. That prison called Ascombe Grange is a facility for women and their children, because the research points to the fact that women heal if they can heal within context, as opposed to isolation, because women are bound by nature to relationships. We are relationship oriented. And so we are at our best when we are in relationship. We are at our worst when we are isolated. That is very different from men, because men tend to, because of who they are and how they think, sometimes isolation is best for them and how they perceive their role of dominance and or leadership in a culture. But for women, even if they are leaders within context of relationships. So having their children there with them, and the rooms in the prison were set up so that bunk beds here, mommy's beds right over here, toys. There was a developmental center in the prison. There were activities for children and moms on the prison grounds. We're talking equestrian sports, soccer, hockey, gardening, any kind of garden activity or outdoor activity you could think of. Now, the children were all 5 and under. And so the psychology behind having small children there is that, of course, personality and all the life skills that one needs develops between birth and about 5 or 6. So these children are flourishing, and they've got all the staff there. They've got social workers. They've got teachers there. They've got all kind of literacy, mental health, all of it's there. The women who are incarcerated walk around with clothes on just like you and I. And they have a network of support because they feel as if I matter. I'm more than a number. I'm not just a number. I'm here with my children. My children are meeting other children. And the paradigm for that kind of setting for incarceration really, really, really perked in me. So when I returned to the US, I sat with some other like-minded people and said, I'm going to try to create the same thing that I saw, because God would not show you something and not have it impact what you're thinking or what you're doing or what he may have you to do. That's the reason I saw it. So coming back home, I rolled my sleeves up, began to speak with some investors, persons who were like-minded and persons who believed in what I was talking about. I wanted to create something. And in the middle of a pandemic, when women are returning home from prison because of the pandemic in record numbers, it does not mean that they all have the resources that they need, but it does mean that they will not be in prison during a pandemic. So releasing them and having somewhere for them to go, that's when I began to really see the need for what I was doing. So at this point, we've got a great deal of interest, investment. And for us, when we move forward, we need the investment. We need people who will walk with us. They may not know exactly what we're doing. They may not show up face to face, but they will show up in some kind of way to let you know, I'm interested in what you're doing. What you're doing has merit, and it is for the kingdom. It's for the kingdom building. So my investors and I putting all kinds of things together for a home for a mom and her kids, or several mothers and their children, because we're talking about a larger facility that is totally furnished. Every spoon, fork, knife, cup, TVs, computers, everything. And so we're going to call it Grace House. And the plan is to have several Grace Houses so that they are in different parts of the DMV and perhaps around the country. So that's what I have been doing, and I've just been running on adrenaline, supernatural, spiritual adrenaline moving forward, particularly since I was conferred with my degree. It opened up even more doors.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And the work that you are doing is phenomenal. And I'm really excited about the Grace House franchise and really offering an opportunity for women to come to be rehabilitated and have their children with them. And I remember you and I having a conversation about the lack of shelter or the lack of halfway houses and shelters and that kind of thing for women who are coming out of prison versus the men who return home from prison. And so I want to ask you about the work that you do at the halfway house and some of the programming that you all offer there to help women who have returned from prison.
Well, let me start or preface this part of the conversation by saying, historically, prisons were not built for women. Historically, if you go back hundreds of years, when you think of prison, you thought of men going to prison. So the phenomena of women being in prison was a kind of spotty plan, if you will, from state to state in this country about what to do with women who break the law. And most of the sentencing and imprisonment centered around morals, the moral law that women were breaking, as opposed to the violence that comes when men are incarcerated. Their sentencing is more around violence and breaking law, as opposed to women, which was moral, which means that society holds women to a higher moral standard than they do men, which makes our incarceration worse than men because of the nature of how we are expected to behave. You're punishing me because of lack of morals more than anything else. So I put that out there first. The Fairview Reentry Center for Women is the only transitional center for women in Washington right now. And we've been there for a few decades. Our work has been absolutely paramount for the numbers of women who come through the area. And we have women at the halfway house from every penal institution in the country. One of the things that happened when Lorton shut down is that persons who committed offenses in our DMV area used to be sent to Lorton. But when Lorton shut down, that meant if you commit an offense, you go to any of the 50 states. So you may have someone in Connecticut who is from DC, coming from a penal institution in Connecticut, coming from a penal institution in West Virginia, coming from Texas, Arkansas, I mean, any place, Dakota, California, you name it. So when they return to the area, number one, particularly for those who've been away a long time, reestablishing relationships is pivotal for them. Some of them, their children are here with local family members, others of them not. So our programming centers around reintegration on all levels, establishing connections, spending time with family if that's possible. Of course, the pandemic has made it more difficult, but we manage each year since the pandemic has gone on to have a cookout for the women and their family members and significant others. So it brings family together. We have a literacy program, life skills, substance abuse, finance and budget. We have a computer lab, and so we have a fully staffed computer lab where women are able to gain some computer literacy. And for many of them, it is a tremendous struggle because even in this short time, some of them have been away. And think about those who've been gone for 5, 10, 15 years, trying to figure out what the world is doing has been overwhelming. And that's one of the things I hear them say all the time. I am overwhelmed. I don't know what I don't know, but yet I realize I don't know it. Whichever way I turn, everything I am currently doing is insufficient for where I need to go. So I need people to be patient with me. I need people, and this is what they say, these are their voices. I need people to be patient with me. I need someone who will not judge me. I need someone to mentor me. For many of them, they say, I need a mom. I didn't realize how much I need a mother. I may be 50 years old, but I need a mother. For many of them, they want to reestablish their relationships with persons that they were involved with romantically before they went away, and they don't realize they may not be ready to do that even. So being able to sit in place to analyze what you need is probably the greatest asset of what we do there. Now you just need to be. You need to be. Who are you? When you open the show and ask me, who was I? That's the question I ask all the time. Who are you? And for many of them, they say, I don't know. I really don't know. Well, you're in the right place now, sister, because we're going to walk this thing out and sit this thing out and journal this thing out and talk this thing out and pray this thing out, and you will get some sense of it. So we're not a panacea. We're not going to cure everything that's going on, because life's journey in and of itself will bring you to stages of health and healing and wholeness. But we're going to start something while you're here. And so they are able to stay there for up to 18 months. Some stay a little longer. And in that time, we get housing for them. So we are under contract with various community agencies that provide skills for career so that they're able to get that job on some level. agencies that provide total wardrobe, accessories, and all of that goes with going out for that interview and landing that job. We have a wonderful relationship with Georgetown, the Pivot program there. And that Pivot program prepares them for oration. How do you express yourself? How do you interact verbally? What do people hear from you when you open up your mouth? How well do you present yourself? It's been a phenomenal success, and some of our students have actually been employed by Georgetown. So we've got all that going on, and because of mental health is such a huge portion of their reentry. In fact, mental health is a huge portion of who we are in the world right now. Everybody's looking in all directions to make sure we're balanced and whole. But that's a huge part of coming home, to figure out what's going on up here, what's going on in your heart. How are you thinking? What is your self-narrative? What do you say about yourself? And what do you say about the experiences you've had, so that your thinking is transformed? If you see yourself as a victim, if you see yourself as someone who has been tread upon by life, how do you change that narrative so that you are victorious? Okay, some things have happened, but that happened. It's not me, but it did happen. So changing that narrative is so very important. And that was a small part of my dissertation work. The research that went on for maybe about 2 years, actually, before I could put it all together statistically, but the change in narrative for women who had been traumatized, and about 80% of women who go to prison have been traumatized before they go to prison. So we're talking about persons who have been mistreated by the world before they get mistreated when they go into a large facility with people who are angry and hurt and broken. And the other part of it was learning to receive and understand what gratitude looks like and feels like. You may have done X, Y, and Z, but because God is who He is, there was probably somebody in your life that had a light shining on you, even if it was for a moment. If you don't grasp a hold of that, you will have the impression that life is a continual cycle of trauma and being tread upon, when it is not. It is not. God has angel armies everywhere. The God we serve has people everywhere. It could have been a teacher that said something to you, a neighbor, a stranger. But if you don't learn to say thank you, even in the midst of where you are, Paul gave thanks, Peter gave thanks wherever they were. So that is a constant with women, no matter where I have met them. And by the way, the women in Aspen Grange that I met in the prison there, they were from at least 5 different European nations. But it was like talking to women right here in DC. Same conversation, same narrative, same circumstance, from Betty in Scotland, from Charisse from New Zealand, from the same conversation. So it was like I was home. So we sat in the prison having meals together and whatever, and they were saying, "You seem so comfortable here." I said, "Yeah, didn't I just see you last week?" Because it just felt so comfortable with the same kind of issue. So I hope I've answered my question. Your question.
You have, and I'm just marveling at all of the great things that you are doing, and your team at the Fairview. And our time is wrapping up, and so I want to just ask you, how can people get in contact with you if they want to be of service? Perhaps they are in this field and want to make the connection with you, and certainly learn more about Grace House and how they can support you with that. So how can people get in contact with you?
Well, the email that I generally give out to people, womenofworthfellowship@gmail.com. That's the email. And then on the web, WWFIM, that's Women of Worth Fellowship International Ministries. If you look at that website, there is information about what we're doing and how to contribute. But I'm certainly hoping that you will reach out to me through email, because there's probably something, if you're interested, if you've heard anything that I've said today and it perked something in you, we can have a conversation. I don't care who you are. There's something that you can do for the population of women and their children. All right.
Amen. Well, we want to thank you, Dr. Mercer, for joining us on the Nicole Mason Show today. And to our listeners, thank you for joining another amazing episode of the Nicole Mason Show.